Mike and little sidekick pals, your movie this week is a tepid little serving of British cuisine called The Projected Man. It's quite bad.
This time we watch Season 9, Episode 1, The Projected Man.
The film that asks the question, what if the technology behind television was evil?
Ooh, but first, some follow-up.
A little bit of follow-up. Longtime punching bag of the show, Mark Russell, passed away recently, as we record this, at the age of 90.
Aww.
Mark Russell, who everyone will remember from the numerous times that he got referenced on Mystery Science Theater 3000, including a few sketches. You'll remember him from his PBS specials all about politics, where he would play at his Star-Spangled Piano.
Oh, yeah.
And it was real unsubtle in a way that delighted me and many other people when they were about 12 and thought this was the height of sophistication and only available on Notorious Home for Comedy PBS. But,
Notorious Home for Comedy. Oh, Chris.
but he had a long and good career, and, I don't think he minded being a little bit of a punching bag. He had a good life with it.
Well, hopefully he believes that he had a good life too, because not everybody gets to have comedy specials on PBS. So there we go. Wow. The height of sophistication, you say, huh, Chris?
Yeah.
Well.
So that's the big follow-up. Otherwise, are we all excited for our upcoming live show?
I am super excited for the upcoming live show. I'm excited to meet so many of the megaphonic hosts that I've never seen in person before. I'm excited for our sister podcast, By the Bywater's 50th episode, because what a wonderful milestone that is. So it is going to be lots of fun.
And how wonderful that they've announced what they're going to be talking about. Their topic will be the Peter Jackson Hobbit movies, all of them. Let's get them over with.
I can't imagine. It's going to come to blows, Chris. It's going to come to blows.
Is it? Are you going to defend it? Are you going to be up there saying, how dare you?
Well,
there's that one hot one.
I mean, first off, I think we all agree dwarves should not be hot. That sort of goes with the territory. But, come on. Somebody has to defend. No, I can't.
I haven't seen them. I've just watched a lot of YouTube essays about them.
Well, I think it's not that this is the Bywater podcast. It isn't. But you do have to see the conversation between Bilbo and Smaug because they do that well.
Okay. All right.
But I am very interested to hear what the hosts of By the Bywater have to say about the movies, and I can't wait for them to drag parts of that through the mud. It's going to be fun.
It is going to be fun, and hopefully it'll be accessible for people who don't know Tolkien, people like me who haven't seen the movies or even read the book especially. I read a few pages and bounced off it when I was a kid. Oh well. I'll try again someday. I'm sure I will.
I adore the book. The movies, ooh. It'll be very interesting to hear their take. And I've read the book both as a young person and I've also read it as an adult to my own child. So it'll be excellent to hear them talking about the movie versions.
That's great. We have to figure out what we're going to be talking about.
That's true.
Which I'm pretty sure is going to be talking about one or maybe two of the season 13 shorts, but which ones will it be?
Yeah, it'll be a surprise to both of us, so.
Exactly. So yes, you'll have to show up and find out which one we talk about, or you can wait. It'll show up in our feed, assuming that the recording doesn't get destroyed. I'm so anxious about this, but
Aww.
I'm sure it'll be fine. I'm sure it'll all be fine. I guess I also have to figure out what I'm going to wear.
Oh my gosh. Well, I have, from our TeePublic site, I do have a Megaphonic shirt. I can't wait to wear that. I also have an It's Just a Show shirt. So good.
It's a little weird to wear your own shirt at an event, but it's fine. I'm not picky about that. I will hopefully remember to pack my official MST3K socks.
Oh, that does sound excellent.
We shall see. But before then, we need to take a look at today's experiment, The Projected Man. This time we watched Season 9, Episode 1, The Projected Man. So, you know television? That thing you used to watch MST3K on? You know how it converts light into electrical charges and then transmits those electrical charges to a receiving device, which then decodes the charges and recreates the image? Yeah. Okay, now imagine, what if that technology worked on matter instead of light? And what if the result was three-dimensional? Why, you'd have a really convoluted and implausible form of teleportation. Except we're really committed to this television metaphor, so we're going to call it projection instead. Anywho, projection is the pet project of Dr. Paul Steiner, and he's got it all figured out. Well, almost all figured out. Living things tend not to stay living after teleportation. Projection, sorry, my bad. But with the help of his assistant, Dr. Mitchell, and his old flame, Dr. Patricia Hill, they're sure to get it working soon. Dr. Steiner works at an institute run by Dr. Blanchard, who's starting to be a real jerk to Dr. Steiner. Turns out that Dr. Blanchard is getting blackmailed by a guy named Lantham, and Lantham thinks it would be real neat if he got credit for Dr. Steiner's projection invention. And so, Dr. Blanchard invites the esteemed Professor Lembach in for an unexpected demonstration before the tech is ready. Aha! But the joke's on Blanchard, because Dr. Steiner and company have solved most of the remaining problems, so the demonstration should go off just fine. Aha! But the joke's actually on Dr. Steiner, because Dr. Blanchard has sabotaged the experiment by pouring acid on the equipment. Whoopsie. Well, his reputation in tatters, his funding about to be cut off, Dr. Steiner becomes desperate. He manages to project himself. But maybe not all the kinks were worked out, because half his face ends up all scarred. Oh, and he has the touch of death now, in that if he touches you, you'll die from all the electricity he's carrying or something, I don't know. Anyway, this leads to a lot of back and forth and this and that, none of which is as exciting as it probably should be. Dr. Steiner kills a bunch of people, including Lantham. Oh, and he gets real sour about his old flame Dr. Hill hooking up with his assistant Dr. Mitchell. But ultimately, he ends up back in his lab, using his invention to destroy itself and all his notes, and he goes up in flames. So, yeah, the end.
Meanwhile, on the Satellite of Love, at long last, Season 8 is done, and we've finished traveling through the wormhole. And where are we now? GPC tells us, Earth. But like a million generations in the future, where sentient koalas run the world and dogs are in charge of public transportation, right? Nope. Regular Earth. Regular time, which means, yes, Pearl has made it to her ancestral home, Castle Forrester, which inspires her to play a tune on the pipe organ. Da-da-da-da-da-da! Charge! At our first movie break, Tom and Crow have created a projector of their own. Now, they too can send things molecule by molecule across space and time. And they use this technology to turn Mike's most precious objects into a smoking pile of rubble. And they would have gotten away with it too if Mike hadn't brought Shirley Jones into it. Next up, Mike and the boys also pin their hopes on Lembach staying, much like the scientists in the film. But after a promise of pie and shenanigans, he says he'll stay! Huzzah! Pearl tries to destroy the joyous mood by telling Mike her experiment is part of a long history of Forresters subjecting experimentees to bad narrative. But nothing can dampen this celebration except Lembach changing his mind. No! The bots continue their experiments at the next break, and now Crow has the touch of death. And of all the touches out there, this one's pretty bad. Nothing turns to gold or Skittles or anything like that. Crow just, shakes Mike's hand and boom, dead. which really puts a damper on this whole show. The bots have to heave dead Mike into the theater. It takes another shock from Crow to bring Mike back to life during the movie, which is, good considering we all actually really like this show and we want it to continue, and a dead host just makes it really rough. Next, when the movie's done, the Michael J. Nelson Foundation is looking for a project to fund. Tom's water engine fails to work in its demo, so Crow's project involving a hat and leaf blowers gets the nod. Tom thanks the foundation for the rejection. Pearl has decided she owes it to her family legacy to take over the world. All will cower before her. If only she can use her immense power for evil and not to win on the ponies or the puppies. But she has such a knack for it. What do you think, sirs?
Hey, we made it out of season 8, and this is our reward.
This is no reward, Chris.
Oh, come on.
You and I were talking about this beforehand, but I could not get into this episode. I'm really sorry for all the fans out there who might have liked this one.
Well, so famously on this podcast, we tend to have a difficult time with the sci-fi era episodes. They're just not our bag, and people get upset about this. Even when we put out an episode about a show that we liked. You quite loved Space Mutiny.
I did.
And I liked it okay. I had good things to say about it. Maybe not the full hype, but still, a good episode. And we still got a bit of flack for that, for not loving it enough.
But seriously, is anybody going to defend this episode as a great episode, Chris? This is not a top 100 episode, is it?
All right. Well, you remember that there is that poll that they did when they were doing the Kickstarter for the Netflix era return. And where do you think this episode landed on that top 100 episodes list?
I'm sorry, it made the top 100 episodes?
No, it didn't.
Oh, good.
No one likes this episode. Well, very few people like this episode. I found that the people who tend to like this episode seemingly like it because there is a pretty young woman in her underwear throughout much of it. That seems to be the appeal for the people who love this episode.
So, to be fair, so the young woman who's inside of her undies on the show, she's wearing essentially the same kind of an outfit that half of the girls in Catalina Caper wore, right? It is like 60s bikini type of thing. So it's not like it's heavily revealing the way that underwear on a movie would be now. I almost thought she was wearing a bathing suit instead of wearing undies, but yes, sure, she's on the screen in her undies. And Tom starts making really awful, I want her riffs. And it's like, ew, really? This is not a funny joke. And this is not a compelling part of the story. And it's also a part of the story that could entirely have been cut out, as I believe your movie summary shows, Chris, because you didn't even mention the nearly naked lady in your movie summary. You didn't even mention that she was part of why the experiment went wrong. So,
Yeah, the Tom going, I want her bit is a reference to something that one of the characters in the movie says at some point. But, it's made much worse from the new context that Tom gives it. And at least Mike has the decency to eventually think that maybe Tom is going too far. Mm-hmm. But I saw people who like this episode and like that bit.
Yeah, that bit's not for me, but that's surely not going to surprise any of our listeners who have heard any episode that I've been on with you before. That's not a bit that's going to go over well for me. And I just, in general, found the movie to be relatively slow and lackluster and poorly paced.
Yeah, and this is the exciting version. When this got picked up by Universal as part of a doubleheader, they wanted to keep the doubleheader, the two movies, under 3 hours. So they trimmed quite a bit from the movie, including the opening sequence, which is another experiment. So it starts with them doing a teleportation on a rat with the giant grating noise that happens every time that they do the experiment in this. And it's just again we're doing this?
What? Oh, I cannot believe that there was more to this movie because it's already too much. I mean, oh,
The other thing that I know was cut for the MST3K episode is that there is a sequence in which you get to see Gloria, the Cockney woman who's part of the break-in.
yes.
Yeah, you get to see her cadaver topless on a slab.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I can't even. Wow.
Apparently that was added specifically for the foreign market, but I don't know whether that means France or the U.S. The actor playing Gloria is Norma West. Look out for her in an episode of The Prisoner. Hey.
Oh, that's pretty cool. That's good work to get.
Much better than this movie.
Yes, that's true. Oh my gosh, I can't believe that. That couldn't have been for U.S. audiences because the U.S. would never have, I mean, with all the Hays Code stuff that was going on in the 50s, it would not have been able to make the screens, but I don't know. What do I know? Because I also would have gone to this movie and just been like, why am I even here? Or what could follow this movie that would like make me feel entertained?
Well, the other movie that it was being billed with, which was called Island of Terror, it's a Peter Cushing film. It's probably fine. It's Peter Cushing, right? I don't know. I did not watch it. I did not go down that route.
I think it's all right for us not to play every science fiction double feature that's suggested by an MST3K episode. Oof.
But that was the main one that they were buying. The Projected Man was just you could also get this.
Sure.
There is something that I have to mention because it's the only thing people remember about this episode, which is that when this first aired on the Sci-Fi Channel, the audio was weird.
Oh, how so?
Well, it was really echoey. The riffing was really echoey.
On purpose, or what was happening there?
Apparently, it was on purpose, although you'll see a lot of people saying that it was not. But apparently it was an intentional experiment on behalf of the network who had picked up this successful show that had been going on for many, many years at this point and decided that they knew better for it. So they insisted on a plot for season 8, and then they tried to get it so that the theater segments would sound more like you're in a theater. So please add some reverb to it so that you could really not make out the riffs.
Oh. Did it only last for this one episode?
It lasted for this one episode, and they apparently sent out a few, like, hey, this is bad. We're going to fix it for the reruns. Don't you worry.
Okay. Well,
so they knew pretty quickly that it was not a good idea. But the sheer gall of the Sci-Fi Channel to try that kind of experiment. Just let them do what they're going to do.
The show left Comedy Central for a reason. The Sci-Fi Channel picked it up for a reason. Clearly, they wanted something different to be happening. Fine, whatever. I did not personally appreciate the plot arc that happened inside of season 8, the planet destroying, the trial of Mike. It's not something that I thought enhanced the show in general, but part of that is because I've always watched these episodes out of order. Like, this isn't a TV show where, something that happened last week is going to affect what's happening this week. It's something that you can watch out of order and is enjoyable in that way. And I don't know, perhaps our podcast is sort of built on that premise, but
Yeah, I think also by this point they'd already learned that even if they get the rights for a film, they're not going to have it forever.
Oh, true.
So having something require you to have the rights for every film to make sense maybe isn't the best idea. I don't know. Hey, speaking of the trial of Mike.
Uh-huh.
Do you prefer knickers to panties?
Panties, 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 knickers, knickers,
You're
knickers.
coming around to that,
knickers,
did I see?
Knickers, knickers, knickers. I don't know. I have no preference between the two. The Britishisms that they're using. Is the movie actually British, Chris, or is it not?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so it actually being British means, whatever. They're saying panties when they say knickers.
Yeah, no, they make a lot of jokes about the British, and many of them made me wonder if they'd ever actually heard of the UK. The jokes were so paper thin. I don't know. Grumble, grumble, grumble.
Yeah.
I don't know. This episode...
lackluster.
very lackluster, very boring. I don't have a lot to say about this one, so we might be stretching a little bit for time.
All right.
This time around.
I'm so good at stretching.
Hey, oh, by the way, welcome to Castle Forrester. It is where we're going to spend the rest of the sci-fi era for the next 2 seasons.
Oh, really? Oh, I think I'm going to miss that VW microbus going through space. I really enjoyed that, actually. I really enjoy Pearl Forrester, like, looking into the rear view mirror of her VW microbus and being like, la la la.
I couldn't decide whether I loved or didn't love Pearl's organ playing, which was as if she had heard about what an organ player might do. Which was so inaccurate, but it was clearly intentionally inaccurate. Like, she didn't try to, so I guess that was part of the joke. What I did love was when I realized that the organ was made up of 3 synthesizers stacked on top of each other.
No way! I did not catch that, Chris. That's phenomenal!
I didn't catch it until the 3rd time I was watching this episode for this show, which is too many times to watch this episode.
Yes, it is. My goodness. But 3 times, 1 for each of those synthesizers. You're a good man.
Okay, so The Projected Man comes out in 1966 to reviews.
I reviewed this movie. Yep.
And, it's competent, I guess is what they're saying. It's not the worst thing they've ever seen, or maybe it is in some cases. But a lot of people said, boy, this movie sure seems like The Fly.
Oh. I guess.
Yeah, because, it's a movie about somebody whose experiment goes wrong and gives them powers, and it's not that great. And it is, I guess, a bit like that. I haven't actually seen the original Fly. I guess I haven't seen either of the Flies.
Not even the Jeff Goldblum one from the 80s?
No, I've seen more clips of that, but I have not seen the Jeff Goldblum one or the 1958 one with Vincent Price. Which I probably should,
Yeah, that sounds really compelling, actually. Vincent Price would have made this a better movie. In any of the roles.
Oh, God, yes.
In any of the roles.
Any actor would have made this a better movie.
Oh, my God. Well, I would not go on that limb with you. There are some actors I do not think would have improved this movie. However, Vincent Price, even as the secretary, would have made this a better movie.
Yes, absolutely. There was another movie that this film got compared to called 4D Man.
What does the D stand for? Dimensions?
It does stand for dimension, yes.
Huh. What is the 4th dimension?
Good question. It's time.
Oh, as usual. Very good.
But maybe also not. I don't know. It's a little confused. So 4D Man is a film from 1959, and I decided to actually watch this one.
Oh, did you watch it 3 times, 1 for each synthesizer as well?
No, there is an utter lack of synthesizers in this movie, I'm afraid.
Well, then how can it be a good movie, Chris?
Well, I'll tell you what is in this movie, Lee Meriwether.
Really?
Yes, a.k.a. Catwoman from the 1966 Batman movie.
Mm-hmm. She's phenomenal.
Yes. So let me tell you a little bit about 4D Man.
Okay.
It's got 2 brothers, Tony and Scott Nelson. They're both scientists.
Wait, Tony Nelson from I Dream of Jeannie is in it? Major Nelson? No, different Nelson. Okay.
Was his name Tony?
I think so. Gosh, now I don't remember. But yeah, I thought it was Anthony Nelson.
No, you're right. It is Tony Nelson. It is Tony Nelson. You're right. No, it is not that. It is not that.
It's not
Tony
that
Nelson.
Tony Nelson.
As far as I can tell.
Okay.
Maybe they took the Tony Nelson from I Dream of Jeannie's name from this movie. I'm not sure. It's such an obscure name, Tony Nelson. Who would ever have come up with it?
I know.
So Tony's a scientist. He loses his job for spending too much time on his own work and causing a massive fire that causes the entire building to light up. And so he goes to his brother to hang out for a while. Lee Meriwether plays Linda, who is Scott's girlfriend, but then Scott's girlfriend falls for Tony, the new boy in town.
Good Lord. Like you need a love triangle.
Yeah. And this isn't even the first time that Tony's taken a girl, so to speak, from Scott. So...
It's just Moonstruck all over again. Or maybe Moonstruck is based on the 4D Man. Anyway, go ahead.
We'll find out. So, Scott is working on making a material that is impenetrable.
Okay.
Sounds very handy for military purposes in particular.
Sure. Uh-huh.
Tony, on the other hand, is working on a way of manipulating the fourth dimension so that you can pass anything through any material.
Oh, is this when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? Is that what this movie's about?
Kind of.
That's so cool.
But maybe not.
Oh, okay.
So Scott's boss, Carson, is taking all the credit for Scott's work. Tony's got his girl. There's another guy at the lab who's trying to steal Scott's spotlight. He's getting a little bit frustrated. He's getting a little bit desperate. And eventually he works with Tony's theories and figures out how to go 4D himself. Has to do with electricity in his brain. It makes no sense, but it's fine. It's fine. Also, this involves time manipulation, because I guess that's the 4D
Sure.
that you're using. I don't know. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. The important thing is that every time he does this trick, every time he passes through something through the fourth dimension, he gets a little bit older.
Oh.
And it turns out that if he does this to a human, they get very old, very fast, and they die. He's basically stealing time from them.
Oh my gosh, like the Skeksis stealing time from all the little gelflings in the Dark Crystal.
Yeah. This movie has influenced generations of films.
Oh my goodness.
So Scott gets drunk on his newfound power, and he goes on a bit of a crime spree. But, how are they going to stop him if bullets go right through him? And if he can slip out of any jail?
Yeah, those are all good questions, Chris. How do they stop him?
Lee Meriwether basically gets him to kiss her. And since he doesn't want to hurt Lee Meriwether, his girlfriend who is straying, he doesn't use his power while he's kissing her. And since he's not using his power, things will go through him. And so, spoiler alert, she shoots him.
Oh, kiss of death, man.
It's a pretty good movie if you're into these kinds of movies. It is much better than The Projected Man, let me tell you that.
Sure, but that's not a very high bar to cross. I'm just saying.
No. But there are a lot of, similarities, right? Like you've got the scientist who's working in the lab whose boss is being all weird. You've got the love triangle thing. You've got the experiment turned on yourself that gives you the touch of death and so forth. Like, there's a fair number of similarities. I see what people mean when they say that The Projected Man seems an awful lot like 4D Man.
I don't know. 4D Man sounds a lot like Faust, but not with the devil giving him powers, but with science giving him powers.
Yeah, I see that. I'm also interested because as I was watching it, I'm like, hey, Scott here, he's alienated from his labor, right? Like, he's making this cool stuff. His boss is taking the credit. His boss names this impenetrable material after himself.
Ugh. Awful.
And when in the press conference to announce it, he can barely remember Scott's name.
But his name is Nelson. It's just not that hard to remember.
Well, that might have been the problem. But
hard to forget, I meant. Anyway.
Okay. And he's got a relationship which is, let's say, more dutiful than passionate, even though it's with Lee Meriwether, which honestly.
That just doesn't seem believable right there.
Yeah. But he's trying to do the right thing. Like, he's trying to work the jobby job that society tells him he should. And he's trying to be responsible. He's got this brother who's sort of head in the clouds, coming up with these big ideas, not caring about keeping his job, not even worrying about if he gets a job or not. And like, that's all appealing to the ladies and all that stuff, apparently. And
is it though?
It is in this world.
Okay. All right. In the fourth dimension, ladies love men without jobs.
So Scott goes from this like really disempowered state, and then suddenly he gets this amazing power where he can like put his hand through things and steal diamonds from the jewelry store, and he can walk into the bank and take all the money he wants. And if somebody's coming after him, he can kill them easily or let bullets pass through him. Like, he's got tremendous amounts of power, and he doesn't know what to do with it. And it just seemed like a really interesting movie talking about, like, I don't know, power and masculinity in the 50s. It seemed like it was saying something. I don't want to sell this movie too strong, but it felt like it had a point in a way that I didn't get from The Projected Man.
Yeah, The Projected Man definitely doesn't seem to have the same thing going for it. The idea that all these doctors are working towards something and that something's been thwarted for a specific reason. I mean, I have to say, even while I was watching it, Chris, I wasn't even getting the impression that they were trying to steal Dr. Steiner's idea so much as just completely discredit him out of some sense of professional disrespect or spite. And it's just, is that really the scientific community of the 50s and 60s. I don't know.
Yeah, it might have been. I wasn't there, but it was weird. It definitely was weird. It definitely didn't feel like it had its whole plot together. Even the most interesting thing in The Projected Man, which is that the boss of the scientist is made to do all this because the person who's funding the lab is blackmailing him.
Yeah, even that's got a light touch. You could easily miss that plot point.
Yeah, and they don't really go into it in an interesting way, despite it being a tantalizing detail. I don't know. Maybe something got cut from this, but I don't know. They didn't bother. It felt like they didn't fully bake that.
There's so much about the movie that wasn't fully baked at all. The relationship between the female doctor who comes in and the assisting doctor, like that seemed a little I don't know. That did not seem like a really interesting love triangle. Like, why? Why is she interested in this other person? No reason, but they get to have like little sexy scenes, so good job.
I mean, come on, the chemistry was deniable.
In fact, much like all of the science in the movie, the chemistry between them was deniable.
It was highly falsifiable, and indeed, the experiment did not go off according to plan. There's one or two other things I want to say about 4D Man, the much better film that I'd rather we were talking about for an hour today. One is that there's a sweet cameo by Patty Duke as a young girl.
Oh, before she was her cousin?
Yeah. She's about, 10 or 11 in this, I would say. Perfectly charming little role in this.
Mm-hmm.
And the best thing about 4D Man, the score, it is jaw-dropping. It is amazing, the score. I got so excited by it. I say amazing. I'm not saying it is like the best film score ever, but it is incredibly compelling in that it's very jazzy and it sounds like the best possible jazzy TV show soundtrack.
Oh.
It sounds like, Police Squad or something like that.
Oh.
It's not the same composer as Police Squad. But it is an amazing composer. I looked him up, and it turns out he's got a whole interesting life. So let's do a Scorner about the composer for a different movie. The music in 4D Man, which I strongly encourage everyone to check out at least a little taste of if you don't want to sit through the whole movie, was done by a guy named Ralph Carmichael. So Ralph Carmichael, you may have heard some of the music he worked on in other things. He worked on some TV shows like I Love Lucy and Bonanza.
Dun, 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 dun.
He also did some work for some singers such as Rosemary Clooney and Nat King Cole, and actually a bunch of other people. Ella Fitzgerald, Bing Crosby, Peggy Lee, all these people.
How has he done all of those things? And he's not a name that's at the top of my brain, you know?
Well, he wasn't the primary guy for a lot of those people, except Nat King Cole towards the end of his life. There, they got a really good, close working relationship. He did Nat King Cole's Christmas album, The Magic of Christmas, and was working on a few more things with him when Nat King Cole passed away.
Does that mean that he did the chestnuts roasting on an open fire song? Is that from that album?
No, the Christmas song was recorded much earlier, though it often gets added in re-releases of that album.
Okay.
And he did re-record it later, and maybe it was with Carmichael. I'm not sure. The other thing he did was he got some film gigs, and specifically, he got the gig as a composer for another film by the same producer as 4D Man. The first film that he did was for a film called The Blob.
Oh, man! That must have been so much fun to write music for.
I bet. I also have not seen The Blob, shamefully enough.
Oh, but you don't need to see The Blob to, have the experience of the music from The Blob, because they totally used it inside of the previews, and the previews you have definitely seen.
I haven't seen it in a while, and I should go and rewatch it. I'll go and rewatch it before this episode goes out, so none of you can actually say that I haven't seen it.
Yeah, nanny, nanny, nanny. Maybe you'll even put a link at the show notes so that nobody can be a person who hasn't seen it. Yeah!
Exactly. Yeah. So, he did a lot of great work. He even did the music for and the theme song for My Mother the Car. I know you were always wondering who did that theme song.
Yes, it's always bothered me.
Okay, that's all well and good. That's not what he's most known for.
Okay.
What he's most known for, or what he was most professionally successful in, was that he kind of was one of the founding people behind contemporary Christian music.
Chris, this just took a real dark turn in my mind. Did you have to go there in this, Scorner? Couldn't we just hang out in lovely Blob Land? I like the Blob. Couldn't we stay there?
Well, if it makes you feel better, his early attempts to bring, modern instruments, so to speak, into the churches that he was doing music for were a little controversial.
Okay.
Yeah, they didn't like it. They didn't. That idea of having guitars in church services was not immediately popular with everyone, let's say, especially if you're coming up in a Pentecostal tradition, as I believe Carmichael was.
I mean, it does feel a little hippie sometimes.
Absolutely. But, clearly he wasn't sort of only doing contemporary Christian music. He was working with all kinds of secular music. He did the music for the Blob.
I know. It's pretty amazing right there.
So he had a really wild and interesting career. The soundtrack for this movie is just a delight, especially compared with the soundtrack for The Projected Man, which is mostly, I think, the white noise and horrible grating sounds they make whenever they're trying to make this machine operation.
Yeah,
it's such an unpleasant film to listen to.
Is there a pleasant thing about The Projected Man?
Well, that's why we talk about 4D Man instead.
Yes. Good job, Chris.
Hey, everybody, it's time for the Shallow 13.
It's time for the Shallow 13. 13 not-so-boring little facts about this not-so-exciting little episode. Go, Charlotte, go!
Ian Curtis is listed as the director of The Projected Man, but much like with Space Mutiny, this hides a more complicated story. Curtis had never directed a feature film before, and his inexperience, combined with a very tight film schedule and a limited budget, meant that he just couldn't get the job done.
And so producer John Croydon stepped in to finish the work. They left Curtis's name on the credits. They didn't want to suggest that the production had been anything but a success. But Curtis never directed a feature film again, settling into a successful career instead of writing for television.
Though it wasn't entirely without incident, in 1983 the BBC commissioned Curtis to write a drama about the Falklands War. The head of the BBC then decided to shelve the script because it was a bit too jingoistic and pro-Thatcher. But the Falklands play, as it was called, was finally produced in 2002.
Anyway, the riffs. As Dr. Steiner explains the projection machine, we get this.
Television is one method of transferring a visual image from one place to another. But the image is flat, two-dimensional, lacks life, and needs a receiver.
Like Chris Collinsworth?
What I have achieved is the projection of an object in 3 dimensions, something that has weight, depth, and body.
And orange hair.
And without a receiver.
So not like Chris Collinsworth.
Chris Collinsworth was a receiver. In fact, a wide receiver, in that he played football. In fact, he played football for the 1988 Cincinnati Bengals, playing to Super Bowl victory at the same time as MST3K premiered its riff of Cosmic Princess.
The look of the projection machine inspires Tom to say,
Duran Duran is going to pop in now, right?
and hey, I get this riff now. Duran Duran is a character from Barbarella, and he's got an elaborate, excessive machine that tries to hyper-pleasure Jane Fonda to death, but her capacity for pleasure is boundless. The projecting machine is not quite as pleasurable.
Dr. Hill holds a projected monkey close to her chest, and Crow says,
Wow, is she breastfeeding him all of a sudden? Was she Tori Amos?
in a photo included in the booklet for Tori Amos's 1996 album, Boys for Pele, Tori appears to be breastfeeding a days-old piglet. The photo ended up getting a bit of notoriety, because if there's one thing mainstream public discourse was ready for in the 90s, it was anything to do with breastfeeding.
And speaking of singers, as Dr. Steiner is being projected, Mike says,
Petula Clark's bedroom, here I come.
Anyway, Petula Clark is an English singer, best known in the U.S. for singing the 1963 hit Downtown. But she has had a massive international career.
And an unexpected credit in her career? Petula Clark is one of the backup singers on John Lennon and Yoko Ono's Give Peace a Chance. She just happened to be in Montreal when John and Yoko were having their bed in there, and she popped in to ask Lennon for some advice and wound up singing on the song. Small world.
During an expressive moment in the score, we get this exchange.
Someone's trilling.
Calvin?
Lino?
Basics first, I guess. A trill is a rapid shift back and forth between two nearby notes. Think of a little flourish during a Bach or Mozart piano line, or what the violin is doing here to amp up the tension.
Calvin Trillin is a writer and reporter who's known for some affable books of nonfiction and memoir, but I first became aware of him as that guy who writes silly poems about current events for the lefty journal, The Nation. And he's still at it at the age of 87. Here's one from a few months ago called Musk Takes Over Twitter.
So half the staff was canned at Twitter, and in a way that made them bitter. They say this wealthy retrofitter treats people as just so much litter.
Lionel Trilling, on the other hand, was a literary critic who was part of the New York intellectuals scene of anti-Stalinist leftist writers and thinkers. His most famous book, The Liberal Imagination, sold better than you'd expect for a collection of literary criticism upon its publication in 1950.
And finally, all the notes for the projection experiment are sitting untranscribed on some audio tapes, and a detective wants to know where they are.
Well, what about those tapes?
Rosemary Woods erased him.
Rosemary Woods was Richard Nixon's personal secretary for most of his political career. Nixon decided he wanted to make secret audio recordings of everything that was said around him during his presidency, and Woods claimed she was responsible for accidentally causing some of the infamous 18.5-minute gap in those recordings.
And that's time.
We could have done a whole segment on Richard Nixon. What were we thinking?
We were thinking that we didn't want to do that, although, we could have. I guess that is actually kind of interesting when I was reading up on it to write that Shallow 13 bit. Instead, what should we talk about?
Well, one of the things that we almost never talk about on this show is personal hygiene, unless there's a short specifically about it. And there was a riff inside of the show that was all about a man's eyebrows. And so I wanted to talk about eyebrows with you, Chris.
Okay. Yeah, there was some character. I don't even remember who. It's not one of the main characters.
No, it was like one of the cops or something that was coming in towards the end, and they were watching the experiment or coming in and looking at the experiment. And this guy just had the biggest, bushiest eyebrows I think I've ever seen. It was pretty impressive. And they were like all blonde and flipping out in different directions. They were really impressive. I'm not going to lie.
There was a lot of them.
There was a lot of them. And like the movie was really close up on his face too. So you really got a good gander at those eyebrows. And it was clear that man had never trimmed his eyebrows, not in his entire life.
Yeah, he was going for that natural look.
Very true. And there's lots of different wonderful looks out there for eyebrows. I was wondering, Chris, because you have had like major events happen in your life. You have been married. Did you do any manscaping, eyebrow trimming or anything like that when you got married?
No, my eyebrows are naturally lovely.
Oh, you are so lucky. Oh my goodness.
Well, I don't remember you having hideous eyebrows ever.
No, not at all. Nor do I think my eyebrows are perfectly fine. And I mean, I teach in a high school, and there are lots of different eyebrow looks that are out there right now, and some of them are just stunning. There's no question about it. Some of them are very manicured. Some of them are very wild. It's really impressive.
Well, wait, what is a stunning eyebrow look? I mean, I'm familiar with like shaving little nicks into one or so forth. And I'm also familiar with like old school Lee Meriwether, if I might say, shaving it off and then painting the whole thing in.
Yes.
Which is weird, but fine, go for it.
In fact, yeah. And that's happened it seems like as we look at like eyebrows throughout history, it kind of comes in waves of people shaving off their entire eyebrows and penciling something back in. Apparently ancient Egyptians did this, but I think that they just got rid of most of their hair because of lice and things like that. Like their hair removal was for more than just aesthetics.
They were certainly thorough with it sometimes, yes.
As sometimes we have been as well. In the 20s, they did lots of like taking out all of the eyebrows and drawing them way higher up, like a good Clara Bow brow. But I don't think that those are the nice thin ones that Lee Meriwether would have had, right? The Clara Bow ones would have been thinner and more arched.
Yeah, no, Lee Meriwether in that had much thicker eyebrows than that. Or fatter, let's say. They weren't thick because they weren't eyebrows.
But they weren't pencil thin as they were going.
No. They were grease paint makeup thick.
Yep. And now there are trends in eyebrows where some people have the really super thick, they call them natural brows. I mean, they're not natural for everyone, right? But there's lots of people who have just like nice thick lines of brows and they pencil in to make them even darker and thicker. Some of them want to have specific shapes to their eyebrows where it almost looks like you have a long rectangle of eyebrow, just a straight rectangle. So they shave off the edges.
Like Bert from Sesame Street?
Yes. Maybe not quite as monobrow and maybe not quite as thick and emphatic as Bert's eyebrows, but yeah, there are some students who I have seen who just have that like and it's all painted on with eyebrow pencils and things. So it just shocks me because it must take so much time because they have to pluck all the eyebrow pieces off and then they have to color in the ones that they just plucked so that they can put in what they want to have, and then they have to shape it all and they wax their eyebrows so it all stays in a particular spot. It's intense.
Oh, all right. So I've just started Googling it, and I've seen that there's apparently, I'm just looking at it now, so I don't know how accurate my information is, but this is quote, Korean straight eyebrows, a trend that presumably comes from South Korea, where, yeah, they've got like it's very subtle, but as soon as you see it, it's very, I don't know, for me, it's a little bit startling because it's just shaving like a flat line at the bottom of the eyebrow off.
Yes, it's sort of on the very edge of the eyes, just shaving the part that comes down.
Yeah, so it's like a horizontal line, and then it's like they've put in the baseline of the x-axis, and they're only looking at the positive values on their eyebrows. It looks like little mountains. I don't know. It's kind of a nice look, but it's a little bit startling if you're expecting it not to be a straight line there.
It's pretty impressive.
I don't know anything about this. I don't watch the YouTube videos about people doing elaborate makeup stuff. I don't watch Drag Race even.
You don't go through the Instagram profiles of all of these beauty queens that are telling you how to do your eyebrows? Chris, I'm so shocked. I totally pictured you being an Instagram follower of every single one of these beauty tip people.
I've tried. Because I know people like the beauty YouTube stuff in particular. It's the one that I have looked around at. Because there's something very soothing and calming about it. Like it's an ASMR thing for some people. And it just didn't do anything for me. And I couldn't realize, I do sometimes get into watching videos about things that I have no interest in actually doing. Woodworking. But I watch so many woodworking videos just because they're very calming. But I don't want to work wood. But I never made it into the makeup stuff.
I'm impressed by the lengths that people will go to for beauty.
No, I'm absolutely impressed by it. I'm impressed by the dedication. I'm impressed sometimes by the results. I think that's great. I'm not trying to poo-poo on any of that. It just isn't a sphere that works for me. It isn't a sphere that I engage with.
No, and I don't think either of us do, which is why so many of the segments on this show aren't going to ever address things like beauty trends. But I find the videos especially, and we'll link one in the show notes, there's a video of eyebrow trends throughout the 1900s and into the early 2000s, which is fascinating because they bring in the models and they completely redo their faces with new eyebrows. And they do the Clara Bow, one from the 20s, and they do ones from the 60s where everybody went for a more natural brow because of the hippies. So they do the ones, they have some ones from the 80s that have the power brow for our power suited ladies. So
did they put little shoulder pads into their eyebrows?
They totally do. You can just imagine the immenseness of that power. It's amazing. But now, the trend now is not to shave off your brows and pencil in new ones. There's a bunch of people now that are just shaving off their brows.
Oh.
They're going with a no eyebrow face.
I mean, it must save time.
I don't know. I mean, if you're spending lots of time making an eyebrow, then yes. If you're just going with your natural brow like you or I might do, what time is saved? So
I don't know.
I don't know.
So you've never been tempted to try anything different with your brows?
Oh, so I have waxed my brows. There was a point in time in my 20s where I did get my eyebrows waxed fairly regularly, but I didn't change the shape of them. Most of what I was doing with the waxing was cleaning up, the little hairs that are underneath of the most prominent part of your brow that kind of come down in your eye area, and the ones above it as well, so that the lines of the brow are a little bit sleeker. I had a friend who would say that if she had her eyebrows waxed, she felt like she didn't need to wear very much makeup, very much eye makeup. And that's also a beauty trend as well, right? Like if you have sleek, well-sculpted brows and you just have a fresh face type look, you're done, right? You can walk out the door that way. So, but it is definitely a look of youth. That one right there.
So tell me that this part of your 20s where you were getting your eyebrows waxed on the regular was after we'd stopped living together?
It was between us living together.
Yeah, okay, good. Because if you'd been doing that and I just never noticed it, I mean, I wouldn't put it past me, but like I'd feel real bad. I
would never have put that past you either. But it's also the case that like if you're just eyebrow waxing to clean up some of the errant hairs or whatever, you're not really going to have people noticing very much that you've done it, which is why I stopped, right? Like, why am I waxing my eyebrows? I don't care. So, and I have to admit now that I'm a little older, some of my eyebrow hairs are coming in a little crazy and they're coming in a little white. And occasionally I'll pluck those.
I remember a year or two ago, I got my first thick, wild eyebrow hair. And I had to decide whether to pluck it or not, because there's only one of them. And it wasn't playing nice with its friends.
No, it wasn't like the guy in the movie who just had a whole row of them. And it was coming off like the feathers on those penguins that just have the yellow hairs going off in all directions. It wasn't like that where there was a whole line of them, just one.
Well, I feel like we ran out of things to say about this movie about 15 minutes into the episode.
I felt like I had nothing to say while I was watching the episode, Chris.
Oh, boy.
But you probably have a final factoid for us.
I do. And it is about the movie itself, and it is about...
What? You mean you're not bringing in an obscure movie that this sort of reminds you of?
well, not quite, but it is actually about other movies entirely, because we've had our second movie with Bryant Holiday in it, a.k.a. Varelli, a.k.a. Dr. Steiner, and he did something interesting in addition to appearing in a couple of really bad movies.
What? That couldn't possibly be the least interesting thing that he's done.
Well, let me tell you something. When we were doing the research for our last episode on Humanoid Woman, as part of the research for that, I decided to finally watch Andrei Tarkovsky's 1979 film, Stalker. And why would I do that? Well, Stalker was originally slated to film in Dessa, a.k.a. in that same part of Tajikistan, on the ecologically destroyed planet.
With the earthquakes and the desert and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, but eventually Tarkovsky decided that they wouldn't be able to supply their film crew there, which makes no sense to me because the Tarkovsky film has a much smaller cast and crew, as far as I can tell, than Humanoid Woman did, but whatever. Stalker, it's a really interesting film. It came out 43rd on that top 100 movies ever poll that Sight and Sound put out in, I think, December. Mm-hmm. It's a slow-paced, moody, gorgeous, every frame a painting, elliptical. It's an art house classic. It's exactly what you think of when somebody says, oh, it's an art movie.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, okay.
And before the movie began, it showed a logo of what looked a bit like a Roman coin depicting a man with a face on either side of his head. And it showed the words, Janus Films.
Oh.
And now, is that a familiar image to you?
So, there's an episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer where one of the old friends of Rupert Giles prays to the god Janus, and he has the two faces, the chaos control, right, type faces, and he's praying to him to switch everything, to turn things topsy-turvy. And I think it's the episode where he makes all the Halloween costumes come to life. And so Buffy becomes a princess rather than being a vampire slayer. And Xander, who had dressed up as an army man, becomes an army man instead of being, a nerd. And Willow becomes a ghost.
Right.
Because she was dressed as a ghost. So it was trying to do a topsy-turvy to the world and change things around and create chaos. So that's my association with it.
Well, that's your association with the Roman god Janus,
Yes.
or Janus or Janus, or however you want to say it.
Is through Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Okay. Yeah, so Janus was the god of beginnings and gates, and that's why we have the month of January named after him, because it's sort of the beginning and the end, and that's the two heads looking in either direction. That's the traditional Janus thing. Janus Films, with that logo, is a familiar sight for anybody who watches a lot of art films, because Janus Films distributed a lot of big-name art house films, especially starting in the 60s. All the Akira Kurosawa films, Ingmar Bergman's film, Francois Truffaut, like anybody you think of as that type of cinema.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And Janus Films was founded by Cyrus Harvey and Bryant Holiday.
Are you serious?
I am very serious.
Wow, that's really unexpected.
Yeah. They had bought a theater, the Brattle Theater, which I guess is old and historic. It's in Harvard Square in Cambridge in Massachusetts. And they screened foreign films there, and it was successful enough that they were moved to New York, started up Janus Films. And in 1958, they distributed The Seventh Seal, which was a huge moneymaker. And I don't know if you've seen The Seventh Seal by Ingmar Bergman, but it stars Max von Sydow, and he plays chess with death. Max von Sydow, you might remember as Jesus from The Greatest Story Ever Told.
I do, in fact. And playing chess with death, of course, I remember from Bill and Ted. So
Exactly. So yeah, he's one of the reasons why so many of those films got such distribution. And it seems like they understood that the films that they were distributing should be treated more like evergreens than as like the hot new thing. So instead of like the B movie, like here's a new, never before seen idea of, the projected man. It was like, here's a classic that you'll want to see again and again. And also you'll want to pay us to bring to your theater every couple of years.
Yeah.
And Janus Films led to, it's a little complicated and I'm not going to get into it, but led to like the Criterion Channel and the Criterion Collection and all that stuff that we have now.
Yes.
But Janus Films, which still exists, owns a minority holding in Criterion. So anybody who likes an art film, which I admit I kind of do, is going to have a bit of a soft spot for Janus Films, I should think. And it's this guy. It's this schmo who's one of the main reasons it happened.
If you've been affected by the issues on this show, if you have fancy eyebrows, or if you'd like to ask us anything, get in touch with us. Our website is itsjustashow.com, and we're on Twitter at itisjustashow. We'd love to hear from you. This show is made possible by listeners like you, and like our randomly selected supporter, Tim. Thank you, Tim. For as little as $1 an episode, you can be like Tim and help us research and record this show. You can join us in a friendly Discord where we all hang out, and you can listen to all our superfan bonus bits. Find out more at itsjustashow.com/Patreon or patreon.com/itsjustashow. And if you want to follow up on anything that was mentioned today, you'll find links in our show notes at itsjustashow.com/episode/131.
Okay, let's put this episode behind us let's get all excited about meeting together and being in the same room with ourselves and with others in Portland in just a few weeks.
That's really going to be so much fun, Chris. I can't wait.
I can't wait either, but I have to because that's how time works.
Yes, that fourth dimension gets us every time.
But we're not going to have enough time to talk about an entire episode for the live show, so we have to decide what we're going to do for our next proper episode.
What do you think we should do? We're in season 9 right now. We have no more season 8 to watch. where should we go next?
Well, ever since season 13 made its way onto Roku and Shout Factory and some other sites, and now that they can be more broadly seen, it feels like we should do another season 13 episode.
Excellent. That sounds like fun.
Yeah, it should be fun. I don't know. We'll see. We're going to do season 13, episode 2, Robot Wars.
This one came out before I was joining the show, so I haven't actually seen it. Is there anything that you want to give me as a prep before I watch it?
It's from 1993, and our hero is not great about women.
Oh, yay! People in the 90s who weren't great about women.
But yes, we will see those of you who can make it in Portland there. Otherwise, you can hear it when it shows up on our stream. And we'll be back in season 13 in just a bit. But until then...
Da-da-da-da-da-da! Charge! Da-da-da-da-da-da! Charge!
Hey, phones do ring different in the UK, huh? Anyway, take it away, Theme Squad. I guess I also have to figure out what I'm going to wear.